I have done something that I haven't done for a very long time, and that is I have accepted a commission. So if you don't know, I trained and worked as a costume maker in the theatre and film industry before my disability sort of put an end to that aspect of my career. So I don't really do that sort of work anymore. Me and deadlines are just not really compatible due to the unpredictable nature of my health. However, I've made an exception for this particular project because it's for a Bronze Age outfit, and I've never worked on anything that early before, and I thought you might also be interested in exploring a totally new era. The client is a volunteer at a living history museum. They do demonstrations of bronze casting, and they've asked for this costume because the museum where they volunteer is having a big event to celebrate Beltane. Beltane is a May Day celebration. I believe the name Beltane is Gaelic. However, I mean, we still celebrate May Day in the villages that I grew up in the village that I live now. We still have some form of May Day celebration, and it's a very ancient tradition. And so this is a really good example of something that when I was studying for my master's, we would call public history in practice. Me making this video, if you like, is public history in practice. It's about deliberately putting aside elitism and academia and instead switching the focus to be about engaging the general public. The British Bronze Age is about 2500 BC to 800 BC. So in terms of the history of Britain, that's pre-Roman invasion. Unfortunately, my costume history education began with the Greeks and the Romans, so I know nothing about this era, and what's more, the way that I was taught to work with historical garments was to look at the primary sources. Of course, there's hardly any surviving evidence from this era, which makes this very challenging. Thankfully, the client, also being an experimental archaeologist, if you like, has been very upfront about the fact that they know that this is going to be, at best, a guess of what Bronze Age dress would look like, but also they've sort of want it to be a bit anachronistic because at the end of the day it's a bit of fun. This event is a celebration, it's a bit of a party, and it's about engaging with the general public. So they have sent me some sources. First of all, they've lent me this book, which is brilliant. I've thoroughly enjoyed reading this. This is Bog Fashion by Nicole DeRusi. I'm not sure, probably Rushy. This is an expensive book, so I'm very pleased that I was able to borrow a copy. There will be a link in the description if you're interested as well. From what I have been able to gather about Bronze Age dress, the surviving examples that we have in terms of Northern European, it's been very tricky for me because, of course, my sort of later knowledge of costume history, cultures are so different. So you would never have a 16th century British person dressed in the same things as you would a 16th century German person, for example, or Germanic person. It all blurs a little bit when we're talking about prehistory. So we're generally, anything sort of Northern European generally tends to include Britain. However, like we're talking about modern day Scandinavia. And so it's been very difficult for me to get my head around that. A lot of the examples that we have, the Northern European examples that we have that survive, are from Scandinavian finds, and that is largely due to the landscape, the sort of bog and peats and things. A lot of the burials have survived there. A lot of the excavations have been done there. So there's some very famous examples. Let me see if I can find one. Oh, of course, Utsi, the Iceman. Etvet girl, here we go, from Northern Europe. All the examples we have from Northern Europe, they tend to be wearing wool, first of all. It's cold in Northern Europe in this period. And all their garments are undyed. We also have no surviving examples of trousers being worn. It seems that everybody, regardless of gender, was wearing some sort of skirt, tunic, kilt situation. Again, that's only the examples that we have found that have survived. The client has asked for trousers, they have asked for it to be made all from linen, and they've asked it to be colourful. So, that left me a bit stumped, but then they sent me reference images from mummies discovered in China. I'm not going to show you pictures because human remains, I don't want to jump scare you. There's links to all these things in the description. These mummies in China, they discovered, had European ancestry. And they are from the Bronze Age, wearing trousers, and dyed. All their garments are in shades of red. So that is sort of the inspiration that we're going for. We're using that as sort of visual inspiration. What I am using this book for, because this book is about recreating fashions. So there are instructions for how to make all sorts of things, including trousers and tunics. There's also instructions on like historically accurate sewing techniques. I'm not sure if I'm going to bother with that. The client was perfectly happy for it to be machine sewn. I feel like costume for reenacting, you're going to want to throw it in the washing machine when you get home. So I will probably be using a mixture of modern construction techniques, like I'll probably overlock raw edges and machine sew most seams, but all the finishing will be done by hand so that from the outside it looks appropriate. So I've met and measured the client and we've discussed all this. We've had our sort of initial design meeting, if you like. I did some initial sketches that we agreed on. I haven't bought any fabric yet because what I want to do is I want to make paper patterns. Of course, not historically accurate for the Bronze Age, but I need to know how much fabric I need to buy because I would also like to try and do some natural dyeing and get some really historically accurate madder red colours. And therefore I need to know how much fabric I'm going to buy. I need to know how much it's going to weigh so that I can order the dye. You know, a lot of things are holding this project up because I don't know how much fabric I need. So starting with some paper patterns should mean that I can at least then map that out. And it will also hopefully give me an idea of how these things go together. And I think that's going to be the plan for this video. So shall we see what Nicole says about how to make a Bronze Age tunic? I'm going for this sort of tunic. This is a sleeved tunic because the reality is May in Britain, God knows what the weather will be like. And then there's a pattern for trousers later in the book. So you can sort of see here, in terms of cutting, it's very simple, but I do need to know how long I'm going to need. Part of me imagines that they wove this custom width, and I will of course have to cut all my fabric to the right shapes. And this is based on Thorsberg tunic. It's an Iron Age example, but oh well. So you know how I was like, I'm going to need to make a paper pattern because it's what I'm used to, and I know it's not accurate, but I need it to calculate how much fabric I need. Of course I don't need it to calculate how much fabric I need. I just drew a little diagram. And I'm perfectly confident that I can measure it and mark it on the garment. Obviously they wouldn't have had a tape measure, but I'm guessing they just would have held the fabric round themselves and been like, yeah, that'll do. Why am I overthinking it? I don't need a paper pattern. What I have discovered is that I need the fabric to be at least 70 centimetres wide, and I'm going to need at least 3.2 metres of it. So that's really useful. Obviously, most fabrics aren't 70 centimetres wide. They're more like a minimum of 140. So I could probably almost even half that because I could get tunic and trousers next to each other. This is, of course, only the linen. The tunic and the trousers are going to be made out of linen, but I am going to get wool for the cloak. According to this book, there are two styles of cloak. One is more like an oval or a sort of potato shape, and the other's just a rectangle. So I can just buy a rectangle of fabric. This is really exciting. It means that I'm on to the next step. And I also, having drawn out all these diagrams, has been helpful for me to figure out how these things go together. But I didn't need to make a paper mock-up. Didn't need to make a paper pattern to figure out how rectangles work. I'm not very well. Sometimes my brain. I'm really excited about that because it helps that the chap that I'm making this for is on the smaller side. But yeah, I mean, like, to only need, what's that, 160, 1.6? To be able to buy like 2 meters of fabric. That's really good going. Is that right? Is that really right? I mean, I know that they're like economical, but still, that's blowing my mind. I might buy extra just in case. Can always make them a second one. It's a few days later. I ordered some fabric and it's arrived, and I am so pleased with it. Because the problem with linen, especially when you're buying online, is that a lot of fabric stores that are selling linen fabric are selling dressmaking weight fabric. Now, that tends to be very lightweight and kind of sheer, particularly if you're looking for white, which is what I need because I want to dye it. So like here, for example, this is from a period underwear project that's abandoned, but you can sort of see how like, just how kind of translucent that is. You can really see my hand behind it. It's just not going to be appropriate for an outerwear garment. Even when dyed, it's just too lightweight. Obviously, linen is used for other things as well, so I looked at sort of home furnishing or upholstery weight linen, and that was either firstly a blend, which I don't want because I'm dyeing it and therefore I won't get an even effect. Secondly, it's often very expensive and was out of budget, and also it's just because it's not woven for wearing against the skin, it can be, in some cases, incredibly coarse and not very comfortable to wear. So I was kind of stuck and was lamenting, oh, they don't make things like they used to anymore, as I often do. And then I thought to myself, well, why don't I just buy vintage linen? Surely, given how little fabric I need to make this project, I can find a couple of linen tablecloths or bed sheets or even napkins probably, and I could have pieced something together out of this. And then I struck gold on Vinted. I can't believe it. I got two absolutely enormous, I mean, double at least, antique French linen sheets. I don't know what makes it French linen sheets. I'm assuming that the person got them in a flea market in France and was like a reseller. But look at that. Look at that! They've got their own embroidered monogram. PM, do we think? Yeah, and you can see that there's like a mend there as well. So cool. So I'm probably going to cut this bit out and save it. But look at how much. I mean, like, I only needed the fabric to be 70 centimetres wide, and like that is easily 70 centimetres. And then easily at like almost 3 metres there. I'm so thrilled. I can't, and there's two of them. And this, all of this fabric, less than 50 quid delivered. Oh my God. Sometimes on a project, things just work out. And I'm taking this as a good sign, particularly seeing as my next challenge is going to be figuring out how to do some natural dyeing. And that's going to be a lot. That's going to be a very steep learning curve. So thank you for joining me for this installment of this project. I have got a lot of research to do in terms of natural dyeing before I cut into any of this. So I hope you'll join me as I start my adventure into the world of natural dyeing. And then it's time to figure out how we sew like it's 1999 BCE. Thanks for watching. See you next time. It is time to tackle the next step in my project to recreate a costume from the British Bronze Age. So at the end of the last video, I had bought my fabric, which is here, my white linen sheets. And in this video, it's time to experiment with some natural dyeing to see if I can get some vaguely historically appropriate colours for my costume. So, I have done my research. I do know that we do not have any evidence of clothing being dyed in Britain or Northern Europe during the Bronze Age. The British Bronze Age is 2500 to 800 BCE. We do, however, have examples of dyed clothing from other parts of the world in that period, so we're using a little bit of artistic license, largely because this is a costume that is being worn at a public event with the sole purpose of engaging the general public. The client wants it to be bright and colourful and fun. So I'm going to try and achieve a similar red colour to the clothing found on these mummies in China using, hopefully, madder roots. I have done some dyeing before, but my experience is quite limited. And certainly I've never done anything with natural dyeing and natural dye stuffs. I also have a whole load of extra complications to do with my health and the fact I don't have any of the appropriate equipment. So this is by no means a tutorial. It is by no means an archaeological experiment or any of that. It's me having fun. So I thought I would show you what I've bought. First of all, I've bought these two books, and I bought 2 books from the same author, largely because this one is called A Heritage of Colour, and it's a lot about the sort of history of dyeing, particularly think like native plants to Britain. So that has been useful in terms of my research into like historical dyeing. And this is a sort of beginner's guide, if you like. And the reason why I was drawn to the work of this particular dyer and this guide was because there is a method in here to dye fabric without heat. I'll come back to that. Now, because I'm still in like the experimental phase, what I did was buy a kit. This is from DT Craft and Design. This is also where I bought my books as well. Details will also be in the description. And so, as part of this kit, we get madder root, logwood chips, goldenrod and cochineal bugs. We also get mordants for plant and animal fibres. We get some colour modifiers and we get safety equipment. So, this is the madder. The smell that comes off this as well. So I believe goldenrod you get yellow colours, and logwood you get sort of, you can get like black, I think. And then I've always wondered what cochineal bugs actually look like. Look at that. Wow. I mean, they're so dried, they don't really look like a bug anymore, but fascinating. And so then the chemicals we have, first of all, the mordants. So the mordants are used to pre-treat the fabric, and this can enhance the colour that you get. It sort of helps the dye bond to the fibres of the cloth or the yarn or whatever that you're dyeing. So they're sort of like a pre-treatment. And then this is ferrous sulfate. This is what they call a colour modifier, and I believe you soak your dyed goods in this and various other things, and you can get the colour to change. So it might change shade, it might change completely. It's really sort of like magic and witchcraft, this, isn't it? I don't really know what I'm doing. And there's a part of me that's very nervous. I have bought some equipment, because obviously you can't use like your kitchen equipment for dyeing because the stuff is toxic. So oops. I've bought the biggest pot I could find. This was sold as like a pickling or preserving jar or something. Have a sieve. This was on the list of things you needed. I've also got like various old wooden spoons and things like that. Oh, I've also got a plastic tub. Usually holds my yarn stash. There is still some bits in there that I need to clear out. Part of the reason I'm so nervous is because of the limitations of my disability, because I don't usually use the stove at all, ever. It's just not safe. It's just not safe for me. So the idea of having to stand over an enormous pan that is too heavy for me to hold really when it's empty, the idea of this being full of scalding hot liquid that could spill everywhere, ruin the entire house, we would definitely not be getting the security deposit back. It's kind of terrifying. And so while I've bought my big pot, I actually don't think I'm going to use it. I think instead I'm going to use a cold water method that's described in this book, which is essentially you put your dye stuff and your fabric in a pot that's big enough for it all to move around, and you leave it for several days, and that's all you do. I think that's possibly going to be the safest for me, and like the one that I'm most confident with. I'm also going to suggest that it's kind of historically accurate. I don't really know, but because there's no evidence of dyed garments in the Bronze Age that survived, and yet there is in the Iron Age, which is like, we could be talking like a few hundred years difference here, right? There must have been a transition period. It's not like the calendar turned to 799 BCE and suddenly everybody dyed their clothes and knew how to make iron, right? There must have been a transition period. So that means there must have been a time where people were like putting things in a pot and hoping for the best. So while like my methods and equipment may not be accurate, maybe my attitude is. I don't know. That's probably just like an art school lie that I'm telling myself to make me feel better. But I think that's the approach I'm going to take. The other thing is that this is 100 grams of madder. I have like nearly 2 kilos of fabric to dye. And according to the guides that I have, you need approximately a 1-to-1 ratio. So 100 grams of madder will dye 100 grams of fabric to a medium colour. So I'm either going to get a really light shade or it's not going to work at all. The other thing that Jenny, the author of my guides, reassures me is that you can, if you don't get the colour you want the first time, you can keep over dyeing it. So if I have to buy more madder and do this again, or if I'm able to do like first round without any heat, if I then have to do a second round where I get somebody to help me and come and help with that, at least then I'll have made a start. Does that make sense? I'm a little bit stressed and starting to regret taking this on, but anyway, it's irrelevant because first of all, I need to double check all my measurements to make sure that I am dyeing enough fabric. It needs to be scoured, as in washed. There are ways that you do this, boiling it up on the stove for hours. I have a 90-degree setting on my washing machine. I'm just going to wash it in the washing machine. And then even before we think about dyeing, the fabric has to be mordanted. So that's these chemical pre-treatments. And I believe for plant fibers, which my linen is, I need this one. It says in the guide, in the instructions, this should be enough to mordant a kilo of plant fiber. So I need to double check all my ratios and stuff. But before anything else, I just need to double check everything. Oh my God, this is actually happening. We're actually doing it. Okay. Step 1 is wash the fabric. I know how to do that at least. So let's get going. Let's weigh it and see how much we're actually dealing with. 815 grams-ish. I'm actually going to overlock those raw edges just because this frayed quite a lot as I ripped it, which means a trip up the stairs. Overlocking done. In you go. Good luck. Basically, I now have to fill this with enough water to cover my goods and dissolve this in it. Which, given that I can't get that under the sink and then carry it, it's going to take me a fucking age to do it with a jug this size. Fucking hell. I'm using hot water out of the tap just to speed things up a touch. But obviously, I don't want to do anything hotter than that because switch to 2 plastic pots just because they're lighter. Compromising safety. This is like, never mind the ziplock aspect of it. Yeah, I thought that might happen. Well, we're using the whole packet anyway. Here goes. I thought this was going to be a Sharpie. First bit of fabric going in. I think I need a little more water in there. Just going to move those a bit further away so you can hear me. It says, slowly heat goods, bringing to a simmering point over 30 to 45 minutes, then simmer for a further 45 to 60 minutes. Just in case. It's an hour and a half later. Hang on. It's an hour and a half later, and this only has just reached like simmering point. And I've just turned it off. I mean, I'm not boiling this for another hour, simmering it for another hour. That's ridiculous. So, also, I've burnt myself so many times on this lid. I'm just gonna leave it until it cools down, and then I'm gonna get Woody to move it, and I'm gonna leave it outside overnight. It's probably too cold for it, but I don't care. It says to leave the fibers to soak in there anyway. I should put that somewhere so that Woody doesn't actually accidentally use it. Yeah. What the hell? So glad I'm not like a 1950s housewife having to boil up nappies. I had a stroke of genius as I was overlocking the raw edges of the fabric so they didn't fray. And I made myself a little, this is just dress net, can you see that? Made myself a little net bag to put my bits of madder in, so I'm essentially going to make like a madder tea bag. And then I'm going to put an elastic band around the top. And then, hopefully, you get my gist. My feet hurt, I'm exhausted, I'm terrified about poisoning myself. This is a lot less fun than I thought it would be. So, day 2, here we are. The very first thing I did this morning was go outside and fill up the 62-litre storage box that I have with water from the outside tap. The reason I did that first thing was because the water from the outside tap is very cold, and I'm hoping we'll get some like solar heating going on. I could also try and boil the kettle and put some boiling water in just to raise the temperature up a bit before we put everything in, because that will hopefully help with the like stewing of the dye stuffs. Left my fabric in the mordant overnight. To say it took like 2 hours to heat up, it took like 10 hours to cool down. It was still hot when I was going to bed. And it's like, it's still slightly warm to touch this morning. First of all, I've got to empty this and rinse the fabric. Now, it says in the instructions this can go down the drain. Well, in the instructions it says most mordants can go down the drain if well diluted. For somebody that needs specifics like me and who is very anxious, I'm like, so the mordant you gave me in the kit specifically, is that in the most mordants category? And also, well diluted, you know, we've got like 20 litres of water in here for 25 grams of stuff. Is that well diluted? Or do I need to also run the tap while I'm doing this? I don't know. So I'm a bit nervous about that. But also, I can't lift this. So I can't even like move it forward really. It's so heavy. And so the only way I'm really going to be able to empty it is the same way I filled it up, which is dipping my plastic pot in and carrying it to the sink. So that's going to be a laborious start to the morning. But then essentially we chuck everything in and we leave it. There's a part of me that does really want to try and dye some yarn as well. So I'll have to scour the wool that I want to dye. So I need this pot for that, and then we'll do the mordanting all over again. Okay, sometimes there's nothing for it. Let's just get to it. This is where like a high wheelie stool would be a dream. My dad bought me this for my birthday. So I can do a little bit of gardening. So, first things first. According to my instructions, madder likes alkali, so we're adding bicarb of soda. I'm not gonna measure it, and I'm not doing like alkali extraction or whatever. Just there we go. That'll do. Got my madder. I've got my net. Thought I'd do it over the bucket. Just in case I drop any or any falls out. So I've got my elastic band to tie it up. Thought that might happen. Oh, can you see that? The water is going red. Wow, that was instant. Okay, I'm gonna drop it in. I wasn't expecting that to float, but there we are. And then, oh, I've brought them in the pot. Oh God, that's heavy. Oh, I've got the spoon. Wait there. Okay, here we go. So, the science here, as far as I can tell. So one of the reasons why this works for madder and not other types of natural dye is that madder doesn't like heat. Here we go, it's going in. And so if you heat madder, you get a very brown shade. I just have to wait now. I think I've got the yarn, the wool yarn scouring, as in boiling up with some washing up liquid. I used my 2-ply lamb's wool cone just because I have loads of this and it's a neutral colour, and also I'm hoping I can use this to do some tablet weaving, and you need quite fine yarns for tablet weaving, so it'd be nice to have some coloured ones to play with. And then I have this, as you can see, this was a ball of merino that I got in a charity shop. It's either had them off or, more likely, when I first met Woody, he wanted to learn to knit, so I gave this to him, and I think Sagan was still a puppy at the time, and I think Sagan might have mistaken it for a ball, and so it's all tangled and in bits. So I've done my best to unwind a decent chunk of it. Just, this is me like, let's just play. You know, yesterday I said I really didn't have fun. I didn't. It was tiring, it was painful, I was footsore by the end of it, and it seemed like a lot of work for not anything to happen. Of course, it's always like that in the stages of preparation. Now I've got like madder stewing in the garden, and I can, like, it's already a little bit pink. Now I'm excited. Do you know what I mean? So that's nice. Needless to say, I don't think I will be becoming a yarn dyer anytime soon. So, it's been over a week, and this is where we've gotten to, and you can see that this has gone quite orange. Not the fabric itself. If anything, I do want it to be rusty, as opposed to like, I want it to be brick as opposed to scarlet, but I'm going to put a bit more washing soda in to try and stop it fermenting any further. Oh. Got a massive amount of room for liquid. I'm still impressed that this worked. It's going to be quite patchy though, but oh well. I'll add to the rustic effect. So, more madder has arrived. This is 500 grams. So that will give me 600 grams total madder that I have dyed this fabric with, which is not quite enough. But this was £32, and like spending £70 just to dye fabric, it was not on the cards. It's just not feasible. So it's nearly the end of March, and so I'm running out of time quite quickly on this project, and so I don't really have time to leave the fabric to dye for another 7 days or so. So I think I'm going to help it along a little bit by doing a heat extraction sort of method. Essentially, I'm going to put my madder in one of my organza bags from Wool Warehouse from when I've bought yarn, boil it up so that it's kind of more concentrated, and then put the mesh bag with all the madder in and the dye in the pot and leave it hopefully 1 or 2 days until it's deep enough. I think that's what I'm gonna do. Yeah, do you know what? Let's do it. Let's do it that way. It'll be fine. I've got a little bit of washing soda in the bottom of that. Got as much boiling water as I can hold. Where have I put the madder? The reason I'm using such a big bag is because it expands. So I've got this here. I've left my wooden spoon outside. This is, I can still pick this up. It's heavy, but I can still pick it up. It's about maybe like 6 litres of water in here. So I can just about hold it. So what I'm going to do is simmer this for 30 minutes, let it cool as it is, so that then I can safely carry the pot out into the garden. And hopefully that will just mean we've got some like warmish water going in there, which will help with the dye process as well. And this will be really concentrated red, like you can see already at the sides. That is, or like, you look at over the ribbons. Yeah, it's going to be red. Okay. I've not got my kneeler because it's starting to drizzle. But let's have a look. First of all, oh, that's heavy. Ooh. Straight in with that. Stirry, stirry, stirry. Oh yeah. Okay. And let's tip in extra quickly. Probably shouldn't have tipped it directly onto the fabric. But oh well, let's just give it all a good stir. I had a realisation the other day that I don't have any thread to sew this with. So this is linen thread. So I'm going to make like a skein of linen thread and chuck it in the dye bath and hope that I've got enough to do some hand sewing. I'm probably going to have to scour this thread, aren't I? I saw a thing which was like you can do it in the microwave, so I might try that. Oh, I should have done the loops. It's in the microwave. I just put it in a dish with some fairy liquid and I'm microwaving it for 5 minutes. It says to do it for a total of half an hour in 5-minute chunks. Okay, I'll try it and see what happens. Hello. It's quite windy. It's been about 3 days since I put the next batch of dye in. Hold on. We have had some deepening of the colour. Like, I think that is red now. it's still quite pink. So my plan is to try and apply some heat. Apparently, heat and madder, you have to do it very slowly. Well, that's fine. As we've seen, it takes an age for this pot to heat up. So what I think I'm going to do is put a little bit of the dye liquid in the pot with one of the bits to begin with. The smaller one probably would be better, which I think is the other one to the one that I'm currently holding. I mean, it's quite an intense sort of colour, isn't it? Yeah, it's the other one. This one. So this might be unnecessary, but kind of want to give it a go for the sake of the experiment, really. Are you ready? Now I'm going to have to spend for bleeding ever doing this. Am I going to be able to pick this up? Okay. What else I'm curious about is I put the yarn in. The yarn's gone kind of orange. That's interesting. But I'm also looking for my thread. Ah, there it is. Oh, the thread! Look at that, because that's got no mordant on at all. That's quite good. Can you see that? It's like a little worm. Let's put that on there. Going to need that. Back inside. I'm at the point now where I just am going to have to cool it and dry this fabric and rinse it and dry it on the line. Because I'm running out of time. It's the 31st of March and this costume has to be finished and delivered to the client before Beltane on the 1st of May. So, oh my god. That was heavy. I committed. I forgot what I was doing. This is what we ended up with from boiling it. I think it's quite good. So, I'm going to stick that in there. There's some yarn as well in the bottom of here. Oh, the yarn's gone very dark. That's exciting. Oh, I think that was the brown yarn to begin with. I'm just going to let that drain out. I'm going to save the dye and put it in the pot outside and bring the fabric in from the pot outside in the pot. So first of all, oh, there is a slight difference in colour compared from the one that got boiled and the one that didn't. Now, let's see once we start rinsing. Look at all my beautiful red fabric. So glad I spent like £100 on stuff and dedicated 2 weeks of my life to this project. I'm partly joking. It was a good experience, I suppose, but I am very disappointed with the results. When I looked back at the footage to see just how red this looked, I expected it to get a bit paler, but this is just so annoying. After rinsing it thoroughly in the sink and seeing it get a bit paler and seeing that it was still shedding dye, I had to cool it in terms of energy and pain and stuff, and I was like, okay, I can't stand over this sink any longer. I'm just going to shove it in the washing machine. So I rinsed it in the washing machine. My logic being, it's going to need to be machine washable anyway, so like I do need to kind of test that, if nothing else. And I don't really know entirely what I've done wrong. The only thing I can think is that I didn't have enough alum. It seems that this issue with the dye taking is specific to the linen. So this section here was the one that I just left in the plastic tub. This is the one that I boiled up, made it paler. And the one at the very back there that you can just see is slightly off-white. That was unmordanted fabric that I just chucked in for a few days to see what would happen. So the mordant made hardly any difference to the way that the dye took to the fabric. So I can only conclude that I did it wrong, or I didn't use enough mordant, or there's something particular about linen or this kind of linen that meant it didn't work. Because if you look behind me, because this was the merino. The one I showed you where I thought the dog had got it and chewed the outside. Admittedly, it was brown to begin with, so that's why it's quite brown, but it took the dye really well. And it was I only chucked it in at the last minute when I was boiling this one up. So it was like in the dye bath for maybe like an hour's simmering and then overnight, compared to like 3 weeks in cold water, not quite 3 weeks, for some of the other pieces. And there was a part of me that like when this happened, I was like, maybe it's the madder. I sort of did like a little bit of like going through all the variables to try and identify what the issue was. And so I thought, well, I'll try some of the other dye stuffs that came in the kit to see whether it's something to do with the madder specifically, or the madders that I bought. Would the different dye stuffs that came with the kit produce a similarly disappointing result? And the answer is no, because this was the goldenrod. Bright yellow. Really, really bright. Admittedly, I didn't put this through the washing machine, I just rinsed it. This was what I was expecting, this sort of depth of colour. And so this leaves me in a tricky position because it's the 1st of April. That means I have a month less than to complete this commission for my client, who needs it by the 1st of May. While these results might be authentic to my sort of like experimental archaeology philosophy of chucking it in a pot and seeing what happens, like they might have done in the Bronze Age, it doesn't fit the brief. It's not what the client asked for. So I feel very much like I'm throwing good money after bad here, or at least good energy after bad, because I need to make this costume. I need something. So what I've decided to do, I have ordered some linen fabric from a specialist supplier called Hertz Specialist Fabrics, I think it is. Some linen and some wool fabric that is madder red that will be appropriate to make a costume of this kind. However, they only ship out on a Monday, and next Monday is Easter Monday. Nearly said Ooster. Is Easter Monday, and that means the post is going to be a little messed up. And that would leave me maybe a week maximum to get this project finished. And given how unpredictable my health is, that's just not a good solution. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to work with the fabric that I currently have and sew it up into some garments. Sort of like a toile, almost. And then once I have something, I can either try and naturally dye it again, increasing the mordant, reusing things that I already have. If I have to buy more madder, I have to buy more madder. If I have to throw another £70 after this. But alternatively, I can just buy commercial dye and dye it in the washing machine or in the stovetop with RIT or something like that to get a sort of a vaguely appropriate colour. Even if it's not historically accurate, at least it will look the right colour. Because I think you can agree that natural dyeing, for whatever reason, has not worked for me. This is where I need your help. I need you to tell me what I did wrong. Because as frustrating as this was in many ways, I'm kind of a little bit hooked, especially with the yarn. I mean, I think it must be something to do with the nature of the fibres, and that's why wool is more successful. I've seen a lot of people who do natural dyeing, they tend to almost exclusively do wool or protein fibres as opposed to plant fibres. Plant fibres are sort of known to be more difficult. But I refuse to be defeated, and I think it's just been really exciting for me. And I think that's part of the reason why I feel so disappointed, is that I know there's a part of me that would love this. If I had more energy, if I had more space and I had more equipment, like I could definitely do more natural dyeing. I love the combination of, like, it's the almost sensory, the smells, the magic, the alchemy of it is really intoxicating to me, to the point that I'm like, maybe I'll plant my own madder in the garden. Apparently it takes like 4 years to be viable, so maybe not a good idea in rented accommodation. But yeah, some other things, maybe some marigolds or something. Yeah, I can already feel like the synapses firing and the inspiration coming to me, which, oh God, there's a part of me that's like, oh no, girl, don't do it to yourself, because it was also a lot of hard work. And the results are variable. So I need to know, what have I done wrong? Please let me know in the comments. And I suppose it's time to accept defeat for now and try and do some actual sewing. Thanks for watching. See you next time. The last time you saw me working on this project, I had been unsuccessfully trying to naturally dye some thrifted linen bed sheets to turn into a Bronze Age outfit. I'd been commissioned by a client to make this costume especially for an event that was happening to celebrate Beltane on May the 2nd. And with my dyeing going so badly wrong, that meant I was in a real crunch all of a sudden to get this project done in time for the event. So I knew I was just going to have to buy fabric, and unfortunately I was going to have to abandon my attempts at doing some historically accurate fabric dyeing. And with only a few weeks to go and my unreliable health condition, this suddenly became a race to the finish. So these are the fabrics I've bought from Hertz Specialist Fabrics. This is my madder linen. This was the sort of colour I was aiming for with my natural dyeing. Obviously I didn't get anywhere close. This is also a much lighter weight linen than I originally had, but it's a very nice quality, so that's alright with me. I've pre-washed it just in case it shrank. That's why it's so wrinkled. I'm not going to iron it because irons are not historically accurate. But this is what I'm going to make the tunic and the trousers out of. And then I have 2 wool options for the capes. So I have this one, which I didn't realise when I ordered it that this check was green. I thought it was like, I don't know what I thought it was, but it's green. So I'm not 100% set on this one. This is upholstery wool, so it's quite substantial and it's quite itchy. Whereas this I bought the colour was terracotta. I couldn't get madder coloured wool. But I actually quite like these together. And this one has a much more pronounced like tabby weave. I don't know if you can see that, which is just kind of a bit more what they had in the Bronze Age. It's also, it's lighter and drapier, but again it's not like, there's no smoothness to it. It doesn't really feel like a garment weight fabric. But, oh look, Woody's in the background. Stop stealing my focus. My literal focus. In case you can't tell by the way I look, it's not a great day today. So I don't really want to be doing anything particularly energy intensive, and of course cutting fabric is quite energy intensive. So what I might do is chalk out like some chalk lines of where the pattern pieces are or what sort of shapes I'm going to need on the linen, because I can probably do that sitting down. And then I might get Woody to cut them.
I can cut them.
It's great having a little helper.
Little helper?
Should probably do that thing where I true the edge, shouldn't I? Pull a thread. Make Bernadette Banner proud. Oh, I already do not have the patience for this. Let's tear it instead. Just look at how off my chalk line was anyway from the stray grain. As I started chalking out my pattern pieces, which were all squares and rectangles, I thought to myself, why cut this up when I could tear it? Truing the edge had shown that this linen tore very easily and neatly, so I just measured all my pieces and tore them from the yardage. And a little bit left. Let's roll those up. According to my little diagram, I looked back at my measurements and I actually think I need this to be 70 centimetres wide. Well, that's fine. We'll just use the width of the fabric. And then 160 wide. Let's call it there. And that's the bit I've got left. Lovely. Okay, so this is the piece for my trousers. The pattern piece is this shape. So it's 160 this way and 140, which means I need to cut off 10 centimetre triangle at each end. So I've folded it in half and in half again so that I get it the same on each side. I'll figure out what we do with the gusset in a minute. Well, I've done my best. But I keep telling myself, they didn't have rulers. They didn't have scissors. They didn't have, well, they had chalk. 10 centimetres in. And then, oh, sometimes these things work out perfectly, don't they? Go for it. Oh God, that's too much for my scissors to cope with. Ha 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 ha. Definitely not historically accurate. So, it's this crotch bit that I'm a bit bemused by how it works. Double checked, and it's basically based on hand widths. So like this, it said 3 hand widths. Yeah? Let's cut it to there for now. And see what happens. So that would become a leg. That folds up. See what I mean? It's too short. My gusset bit doesn't reach the waistband. Ah, it's just the... I'm a fool. I'm a fool. Okay, well... It is supposed to go halfway. We're just going to have quite a narrow little bit there. Still a hand's width, just. Right, my mistake. And then that goes like that, and that goes like that, and we get a pair of trews. Now I just have to figure out how to sew it. This trouser construction is ingenious. And I've never sewn anything like it before. It's going to be a very unusual pivot here. And there's a part of me that's like... There's a reason we don't do it like this anymore, and that's because this is not compatible with the sewing machine. So am I going to have to hand sew these trouser seams to be able to... I mean, it's not impossible. I'd probably have to start there, sew down, come back, maybe even like snip into the seam allowance there, and then again pivot everything around this way and sew it that way. At which point I'm asking myself, would I get a better result if I hand sew it? Because essentially we are sewing a V shape this way to a V shape this way. It's not impossible. Felling it's going to be interesting, but then I was going to fell it by hand anyway. Anyway, I'm going to come back to that another day, because what I want to do for the cloaks, is neaten the edges and then blanket stitch them. That's one of the things that is described as being accurate, because there are all sorts of cloaks in this period, but I feel like the most useful one, the most versatile one, if you're like an interpreter, is just a rectangle of fabric, you know, because then you can use it as a blanket and sit on the ground, or if it's, you can also turn it into a skirt or tunic or something. You can just sew up the side with a running stitch and make a different garment out of it. So I'm pulling threads here so that I can get a nice straight square cut edge to the fabric, and then I'll just blanket stitch it. And oh my god, what if I were to blanket stitch it with my matted dyed yarn? Oh my god, that's a genius idea. I'm definitely going to do that. think it's that one. Yeah. Okay then, let's take a length of yarn. Probably don't want it too long, but not too short either, or otherwise I'm going to be here forever. Could do with a thimble. Oh my god, look at me being organised and having all the right stuff. Now, it said, according to Nicole, a stopper knot is historically accurate. So, if I could get it to work, that is. A new day. First of all, the elephant in the room. Oh, it doesn't look too bad on camera, but if you are tempted to sit in the garden all day on a sunny bank holiday weekend and you're thinking to yourself, the SPF in my moisturiser will be enough, right? Right? It will not be enough, although it will do a slightly better job than nothing at all. So, red face out of the way. Today, I finished one edge. Do you want to see? It's like, I can't see which is the right and wrong side. I don't really think blanket stitch does, apart from where I started the new thread. I've not done that very beautifully, but as far as I can tell, that's probably historically accurate, so I don't really care. But yeah, I'm really pleased with how that looks, and I love the variation in the tone. It sort of adds to the, like, hand-dyedness of it all. So I've started on the other end now, but I haven't gone very far. So, I've got to sew on the machine all the seams for the tunic and the trousers, and then I'm going to flat fell them by hand. And I think in the book it says that we often see like contrast stitching as sort of a decorative thing. So what I thought I would do is I would use the linen thread that I naturally dyed as a sort of contrast to flat fell all the seams. And I've been looking at the way that she's done it in the book, because my experience with historical garment construction is sort of 19th century onwards, and so the way that I would hand fell a seam is different to the way Nicole Deruchy describes it in the book. I would sew the two pieces together, trim one down, and then fold the other over the other, but she sews them offset to begin with. So there's a part of me that's like, I should press the pieces and I should measure all of this, make it really crisp and precise, you know, but I am at least going to pin it. I tell you what, let's sit here and pin. I bought myself some of these ergonomic pins a little while ago, and I lost them, so I've not been using them, but I found them again, so let's use those. Oops. Is it possible to pin the other side at the same time? Pin it and see. But you can, it's just the ingenuity of these early people. I don't know why I'm surprised, because they're humans, and like, I'm a human and I can make much more complicated clothes with this. And yes, I have the privilege of education and access to the internet and everything like that, but I feel like in a stretch I could figure this out in the Bronze Age. I only pinned the shoulder seam of the tunic as I would need to fell that seam before adding the sleeves. It was then time to make a trip up the stairs to start machine sewing. Probably do for this project. Let's be having you then. I started with the shoulder seams on the tunic, a very simple standard seam with a gap for the neck opening. took the pin out. There it is. That's where I need to sew to. There we are, that's the tunic. Now, the breeches are going to be a lot more work. For the breeches, I started at the place where my 2 points came together and carefully manoeuvred the needle into position so I caught just the very point of the corner and didn't catch any fabric I wasn't supposed to. I could then sew the rest of the seam as usual. You can see I went for the method described in bog fashion with the offset seam allowances rather than trimming one side down. Lovely. And then we go back to where we started. Think about that, did I? If the quilters can do it with a whole quilt, I can do it with a pair of breeches. So I've really reversed over that tiny weeny point there to make the most of it. But now, we just take that pin out. And we sew. And the other side. With as much machine sewing as possible done, I could start hand felling all the seams, sitting in the garden and enjoying the sun. You can see my madder dyed linen thread here. I promise it did take some dye and is a pale pink colour, but against the deep red of the fabric, it just looks white. For the shoulder seam, because it would be opening into the neckline, I didn't fell the seam allowances over each other, but instead felled them individually to one side. That meant I could get a smooth transition into the deeper hemmed edge of the neckline. I tried to do a technique described in the book to get a shaped curve to the neckline by clipping and easing the hem, but I think that technique probably works better on wool than linen. It just made it sort of puckered. I've managed to get a little bit of a curve in one side, but I think what I'm going to do is actually sew from the other direction on the neckline to try and get it even. So if we're going like that, and then we want like that sort of thing. Yeah. Kind of. We're kind of going to get a curve there. Let's give it a go. My final task of the day was to wind up the other naturally dyed yarns I'd made from my dyeing experiments. I had intended to use these yarns to do some tablet weaving and make my own trim for the tunic, but after a little test session, I realised that I did not have the time to do that and create something of a standard I was happy to use on commission. So I wound the yarn up into balls with the idea of using them, like I had on the red cloak, to blanket stitch some raw edges. I was getting quite tired by this point, so I had to call in some support for this task.
Woody.
Would you crank my handle for me? My arm's dead.
Right, which way do I go?
That way. Yeah.
You stick a finger on me.
Thank you. I'll go a bit quicker.
It's satisfying. I made a skein of yarn.
Well done.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Did I use all the terminology correctly?
It was a skein.
Oh.
You've now made a centre pull ball.
A centre pull ball.
Because look, I can pull it from the centre.
Ah, sexy.
It's good, eh?
Good, eh?
Righty tighty, lefty loosey. How did that tighten it up?
In Spanish, the literal the literal translation that they use for righty tighty lefty loosey is the right oppresses, the left liberates. Which is good, isn't it?
I like that.
Yeah. I don't know what it is in Spanish, but
Who told you that?
that was on Reddit.
Do we trust Reddit as a reliable source?
From a Spanish person.
I mean, yeah, maybe. Once my tunic trouser seams were felled, I decided that to preserve as much length as possible, I would hem them with a blanket stitch in the lighter maddy yarn I had dyed, just for a bit of variety and interest. The breeches needed a drawstring to keep them up, so I made a tube of fabric from my leftover linen. I zigzagged the edges together to prevent fraying. I could then sew the sleeves into position and join the underarm and side seams all in one go. This was a diversion from the instructions in the book, which had you sew up the sleeve and then set it in like you would on a curved armhole, but I decided to make mine more like an 18th century shirt for the sake of speed. I also needed to figure out how to taper the sleeve seam at the wrist, and it was easier to do it this way. Lovely. I left an opening at the hem of the side seams, as suggested in bog fashion, to allow more room for movement. That meant that rather than do a flat felled seam with offset seam allowances, as I had done for the breeches, I would have to do a double fell like at the shoulders. More hand sewing, but a neater transition from seam to opening. How much should I leave open at the end? 10 centimetres? More than that, because I'm going to do a hem as well. Let's go 15 centimetres. So yeah, so to there. And then in terms of tapering down the sleeves, Nicole, in her book, she often talks about like hand widths as a unit of measurement. So I've used 2 hand widths here. It'll be 4 hand widths. Still be quite an open sleeve, but hopefully it will be a bit more fitted. If you're interested, 2 hand widths of mine are 12.5 centimetres. No, 17.5 centimetres. So I reckon if we put that pin in an awkward way, haven't I? Let's start like that. Just go for a very gentle taper, basically. There you have it. A sleeve. So she says in the book it's quite common for them to just fold the excess out like that and then fell it down. So I guess I'll have to turn the edge under and fell it down, but I think in the wool ones they like over sew the raw edges before construction and then just tack it down. So fair enough. Time for the other side. So I think the sleeves might be too long. I'm not entirely sure how I've done this. Oh, I think this is a case of me being like, oh, a bit more won't hurt. So the measurements I have say shoulder to wrist 64, which is a tiny little bit longer than me, but it's the combination of course it's got a dropped shoulder, hasn't it? And I haven't adjusted for that. And I just cut it the width of the body pieces, didn't I? So, yeah, so we're at 74 from here. So that, yeah, they are a good 10 centimetres too long. So, do I undo this seam and shift the whole sleeve up 10 centimetres? Do I make some sort of elaborate cuff situation? Possibly not because of this. I think the answer is I have to take it out of here, don't I? However, just come down the stairs, haven't I? And I've really hit my limit for sewing today, so that might have to happen another time. I suppose I could crack on with felling and hemming everything. There's a part of me that wants to do like a decorative, like here. I'm quite pleased with how that looks, actually. I don't even know whether my attempt to curve this in has made any difference. It certainly curves this way, which might be more comfortable, but I don't think I've got like a curve down like this, have I? It's very much a slash neck. There's a part of me that wonders whether I should have just cut that and overstitched it. Anyway, obviously as well, it's for a man, so the man is bigger than me. I hope it fits. I'm sure it will. I'm sure it will. So in terms of what else I can do today, it's turn the loop for the trousers and get that in. I've got a bodkin somewhere, but I need to make like a little opening as well. It's nice weather, so I might do that in the garden. I got carried away and I didn't show you, but what I did, I was very proud of myself basically. I wasn't sure how I was going to get the bodkin through, and so I just sewed it on with a bit of linen thread, very strong. And then I just made some slits that were big enough and I overcast them. This is my dyed linen thread, as with all my finishing. I used it, just looks white. Oh well. So, if anything, I made the cord a bit short. Let's cut this off. I'm just going to tie a knot in the end, just so it doesn't go back in on the hole, in through the hole. Because I think these are done. That's a pair of trousers though, right? Right? Obviously, got my dress tucked in and my tights underneath, but like, how they look from the back. I'm really pleased with them. They're not, the low crotch takes some getting used to. It's the construction is ingenious. Oh, I'm thrilled. A few days later, I tackled the sleeves again. I carefully unpicked them from the tunic and used a lint roller to remove as many of the loose threads as I could before painstakingly picking out all the individual ones I'd missed. I then measured 10 centimetres in from the sewing line of the sleeves, 10 centimetres, plus the original seam allowance, chalking on a line for me to follow with my electric scissors. I used the trimmed off section as a guide to trim the second sleeve to match. As I'd shortened the sleeves, that meant I would have to redo the angle of the sleeve seams or else they'd start to narrow too quickly. I chalked on 2 lines, cutting and sewing, and then trimmed the seam allowance down. I abandoned the idea of doing the historically accurate seam finish with the extra allowance left in because I still wanted the option to make a cuff should they still be too long. Don't ask me why I've decided to do this, but I've decided that I'm going to trim this one down to be 0.5 centimetre and flat fell it over. It's a bit more than 0.5 centimetre. Oh well. I think I have the possibility of finishing this quite quickly. And so I'm like, well, one less row of stitching, hand stitching, could make this a lot faster. So let's give it a go. It's going to be annoying to fell as a tube anyway, so only having to do it once per sleeve is definitely going to speed things up. I did some finger pressing to make sure the seam allowances would hold their position as I felled them, because I was trying to avoid pinning it, which would be really awkward on a tube like this. So I felled the sleeve seams and I did the side seams while I was at it because I was enjoying myself in the garden, and now I'm going to have to set them in. And I think what I'm going to do, rather than match the seams, is offset them. Why can I not remember how to set in a sleeve suddenly? The book said 7 centimetres offset, so let's see, 7 centimetres. There. Is that going to fit into this hole? As the actress said to the bishop. Yeah, I've made it a bit smaller now, haven't I? That's okay, we'll cope. We can just sew that seam up a bit more. So I think let's start by just doing that little bit there. I didn't fell right the way to the top, so I could still get these in. Got a bee or something. Hang on. This way. Off you go. Look at me, basically David Attenborough. Okay, sleeves in. Well, one sleeve in. Well, I'm glad I filmed the first one and not the second one, because the first one went in like easy as anything. The second one, Jesus Christ. But they're in. Let's just check. Definitely haven't caught anything I wasn't supposed to. No, brilliant. I think I might have misinterpreted how to offset those. Now I look at that. Oh well. Now I just have to figure out how to flat fell that seam. So, just turned it the right side out and I want to turn it wrong way out again. I also think these might be a touch long, so we might have to hem the sleeves, but that's not the end of the world. Because currently I've hemmed that way, and it would almost definitely be easier to hem it that way onto the sleeve. Unless I do both. I think I'm going to have to do both, aren't I? Ah, yes. Oh well, it's still sunny. I'll go and sit in the garden and do it. As so often happens to me at the end of the project, the last few stages, when I've got a deadline, I just completely forget to film, or I do what I did here, which was I try and film and I'm not paying any attention, so nothing's in shot, or completely out of focus. So I just thought I would talk you through the last few stages of this project, because once I had the sleeves in, I fell down that shoulder seam and it was essentially constructed at that point. I still had to do the hem, which I did hand sewing in the garden, and then I had a decision to make about decoration, because what I ended up doing was I put a slit in the neck opening just so it was a bit easier to get on and off, and because I forgot to measure the circumference of the client's head because I didn't realise that was a measurement I would need. I should have thought about it, but I didn't in the moment, and so I thought, well, I better have like a contingency plan to make sure that he can get it on. So I put a little slit in the front, which I blanket stitched the raw edge to match some of the other blanket stitching detail I did on the garment, and then the client had asked for some sort of decoration, and my hope had originally been to use my hand-dyed yarns and make some tablet woven trim. So I did attempt to do some tablet weaving, however, it became very clear very quickly that I was not very good at it, or rather, I didn't have the time to focus on creating a finished result that I would be happy with. So instead, what I did was I ordered from Etsy some trim that was sort of vaguely, inoffensively historical and was the appropriate kind of colours. So I ended up stitching this all around the neckline and sort of doing a mite thing with the trim, just with hand sewing. And I'd run out of my hand dyed thread by this time, so I was just using machine dyed commercial thread. And I made Woody try it on for a picture for like a test fit, so I could send this to the client to check that they were happy with it. And then it was, by this point, it was the end of April, and I had to get this to the client before the big day, before Beltane and the celebrations on the 2nd of May. I actually ended up going to the venue where Beltane is held. My dad took me. He's also going to Beltane, so he was going and meeting up with a few people and things and preparing to exhibit at the event. So that was a fantastic experience to go and see this incredible venue and all the incredible history that they're doing there. And also it meant that because it's a living history museum, they have lots of recreations of Bronze Age and Iron Age buildings, which meant I got a little bit of footage and some photographs of the client in situ wearing their Bronze Age costume that I made for them, which is amazing. They have agreed that I can share these with you, so you're probably seeing them on screen now. This was such a rewarding experience. The client was so happy. I have so much more to say about this project that I think I'm going to make a separate video over on my Ko-fi membership where I talk through a little bit more of my experience with this. I also last minute made a costume for my dad who decided to dress up for this event. So there's some of that. I took some footage of that, but not a lot. So you can see that. I'll put that in that Ko-fi video as well. This has been so much fun for me. I really enjoyed this as a project and I hope you have too. So thank you very much for watching along and commenting and all your advice about the natural dyeing. That was brilliant. Thank you so much for that. I do want to do some more of that, but I'll come back to that another time. So I'll leave you with some pictures that were taken by some other volunteers at the event of the costume in situ. It looked so atmospheric. I'm so incredibly pleased. And more importantly, the client was also pleased. So thanks for watching and I'll see you next time.